Although today's reading covers many exciting aspects of the missionary travels of Paul and Silas, we're going to hone in on just one of those accounts in Acts 16 through 40. You see, Paul and Silas are out there preaching, and they're being accosted by a girl who is demon-possessed. She's shouting all of these things. Behold, these are servants of the Most High God. And yes, it was true what she was saying, but this isn't the way that we preach the gospel. This isn't exactly the PR you want. And it was unorderly. It wasn't right. And Paul and Silas address the demon, and it flees. And the girl is left without the demon inside of her, which is wonderful. But she's also left without the power to make her masters any money through fortune telling, through the demonic powers that she had had previously. They're not happy about that. There's a crowd that's not happy about that. They are rushing. They're causing a commotion in the city. And eventually Paul and Silas are stripped, beaten, and imprisoned. And it's been a long day. But how do they finish? Like, what happens when all of these awful things that have happened to them, when they didn't do anything wrong? Their response? At about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Now, okay, what? So you've had this awful day. You are beaten and imprisoned unjustly, and then you're going to respond with praise and worship. That is baffling to me, because my natural self doesn't think like, oh, let's go do that. But how wonderful that is. And all the prisoners are listening, and then a miracle happens. The prison is shaken and their gates fly open. Now, this creates a pretty strong response from the jailer, who draws his sword to kill himself. And Paul and Silas go, whoa, wait a second. We're all here. Like, don't worry. And he asks them, sir, what must I do to be saved? And I love this, because Paul and Silas, they go, believe in the Lord Jesus. You see, I think that the jailer was actually saying, what do I need to do out of this circumstance? Like, what do I have to do to be saved? He could have, more than likely, have been executed for having lost all of the prisoners. So he sees this as an incredibly dire situation. And he's asking, what do I do to be saved? And yet, there's a deeper salvation at hand, and Paul and Silas let him know, this is about the Lord. This is about your salvation for eternity, not just this salvation in the moment. It says in verse 27, then the jailer woke up. When he saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, because he thought that the prisoners had escaped. But Paul shouted, don't harm yourselves, we are all here. The jailer called for the lights, rushed in, fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He then brought them out and said, sirs, what must I do to be saved? They replied, believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household. Then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all the others in his house. And at that hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed their wounds. It says that he took them out of the jail. He washed their wounds, meaning it had to have been severe. And then he set a meal before them. And then he was filled with joy, because salvation had come to his household. Him and his whole household were baptized in that moment. But Paul and Silas show an even greater faith and an even greater concern that it's really not about them. It appears that they would go back into the prison, because it says in our reading that in the morning, when they looked to see the prisoners, they called Paul and Silas out, meaning they were in there. They called them out and they released them, the magistrates, those in charge. And it's kind of like this no big deal. I mean, it is a big deal, but they don't make a big fuss. They just go. And when they do, they encourage others. In verse 40, it says, after Paul and Silas came out of the prison, they went to Lydia's house, where they met with the brothers and sisters and encouraged them. Then they left. You know, sometimes I think we get really sucked into being a victim. Like, things can happen to us, pretty intense things, pretty hard things. I think sometimes it's really easy to just focus a lot on ourselves, even when there are legitimate problems in our own lives. What I love is that Paul and Silas showed us an encouraging example of how, yes, they're out there doing the right thing. They're being treated unjustly. They're still looking out for others, and even afterwards, they're encouraging others. And that's a very hard thing to do. And I'm not saying like we can all just do that magically. That's not the point of this lesson. But I find it encouraging to see such a great example of others who are constantly seeking to serve, seeking to look out for the good of others, not making it about themselves, and being an encouragement wherever they go. It's a very profound message to me, and I'm glad that it's such a clear example in today's reading.